So thank you all for being here in this Friday afternoon kōrero. I'm going to pass it over to Rodney to welcome us all with a karakia. Thank you.
Hey, tēnā tātou katoa, wholehearted greetings to everybody. Thank you for spending time with us today. It was meant to be at 4 inside your door, but whatever time it is now, 4:18, but hey, wholehearted thank you. Let's cloak our hui, our meeting today with karakia, with a ngi, with a vibration, whatever higher power that means for you. But in doing karakia today, we're honouring our Indigenous peoples of Aotearoa, our Māori tangata whenua. With that said, e inoe tātou. E karakia.
Right.
E te atua. Tēnei te mi atu ki a koe. A whina ki a mātou ki te huhui nei, e tēnei wā. Nō reira, tēnei te mi atu ki te hāpai o kingi tūheitia. Tēnei te mi atu ki te papatūnuku, ki te papanui, ki te paparangi, ki te tangaro, ki te tāwhiri mātia. Nō reira, tēnei te mi atu ki a koutou. Nō reira, ake tonu ake, tihe mauri ora. To our higher power, we pay homage to you. We ask you to come in and sustain our meeting today with strength, with the truth, and most of all, with peace. And then we reach out to thank Tūheitia, our king, our kingi, our Māori king, for thanking him to bringing all our iwis together to move forward and creating Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the agreement between our past colonizers and our Indigenous people. So can bring us here we are, bring us to now where we are in harmony. Nō reira, we thank the earth, we thank the ocean, we thank the sky. To the breath of life, tihe mauri ora. Ngā mihi.
Thank you.
Kia ora, Rodney. Thank you for that. So welcome everyone. I'm Izzy Robinson, the creative producer for Touch Compass. My pronouns are they, them. Just a couple quick technical things before we get into this conversation. If you're joining us on Zoom, welcome. Feel free to have your camera off and on, or on, up to you. Though we would prefer, if you're not speaking, keep your microphone muted, but we would love to see everyone's faces. If you are on Zoom, please turn on your chat function. And if you have any questions, you can send them through to myself or Lish or JT or Zan, and we'll all be monitoring that and checking in with you. If you're joining us on Facebook Live, also welcome. If you have any questions or would like to pose any questions to the artistic panel, just send a message to Zan there or comment on the video, and we'll be monitoring that as well. If anything comes up during today's session, just let us know and we'll try and fix it. Thank you so much for joining us. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome the 3 members of Touch Compass's artistic panel. That is Lusi Faiva, Suzanne Cowan, and Rodney Bell. Thank you all so much for being here.
Ngā mihi. Thank you so much, Izzy. Tēnā tātou anō, wholehearted greetings and welcome to you all once again. My name is Rodney Bell. Ko tainui te waka, ko Ngāti Mana poto te iwi, ko Ngāti Rora te hapu. So my primary tribe is Ngāti Mana poto. My sub-tribe's Ngāti Rora, and I descend from the tainui waka. I'm sitting here in my manual wheelchair, and what's my mother fire? What's where all the intentive motive comes from for me is honouring what the earth and what my ancestors and all the sacrifice that they went to for me to be in here with you today. So I've got a fancy dark vest on, and I've got a light salmon coloured t-shirt underneath, and in the background I've got my buddy, my zebra, made up of many different colours, and it's done with a thick brush. But nō reira, tēnei te mi atu kia koutou. I'd just like to pass on and introduce you to Suzanne. Suzanne Cowan.
Kia ora, fantastic to be here today. I'm sitting here in my apartment in Grey Lynn on my couch which has got a faux fur rug and many rugs actually. And I'm wearing a grey jersey, and I've got my hair pulled back in a bun, and I'm pale skinned, and I'm of Irish, Scottish and English descent. My ancestors came to New Zealand on the Gothy steamship and the Aotearoa steamship back in the 1800s. And yeah, also like to acknowledge all the people that have assisted my career and been here today. People like Catherine Chappell and also people in England, Kanduko, that were like the foundation for my training, the Kanduko tribe, and the many people that have assisted me through my academic career. So anyway, I just like to acknowledge the legacy that that has brought me here today.
Kia ora, Suzanne. And I'll be expressing some of the mana of Lusi today, and no, by no means it's an honour, Lusi, but by no means can I ever match the mana of Lusi, but what an honour to kōrero from your written words. So Lusi said, "Ma lo o, I'm Lusi, and I'm part of the panel. Once again, I'm Samoan. I've brown skin, got my hair in a bun, sitting in my power chair. Nō reira, tēnei te mi atu panel. Thank you so much for introducing yourself." So we're here to kōrero about two major questions. So I'm just going to pop these questions firstly to the Touch Compass Dance panel, and then later on we'll have opportunity to throw it out there and see what sort of questions or provocations you might have for us. But I'm just going to dive into our first question. And our first question today is, what is missing from New Zealand stages? What is missing from touch compass stages, whether it be in the past or memories that they've something strong that they've had in the past that you'd like to see again or so forth? But I'm just going to pop that out. And Suzanne, would you mind to kick off that conversation, please?
Oh, I thought you might start, Rodney, and I was going to riff off what you had to say.
Oh,
but
I can do that, but I thought I'd be polite and let you jump in there first.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no, I'm happy to start. Well, if I start with generally, we're talking about New Zealand stages, and of course, let's think about the whole of New Zealand, not just the Black Box Theatre being our stage. And we perform in many different sites and site-specific performances. So yeah, that disability voice is what's missing from theatre and performance. A strong political disability voice. I mean, it's awesome. We sometimes have disabled people on stage and performing, but mostly I don't see a strong political voice and in that performance. And yeah, I think that's something that we're building, and I think it's been there. And when I say political, I just mean it in a really broad sense, but I mean being really specific about something that we want to say, and that it comes through our lens, and it doesn't come through the directorship or through the lens of a non-disabled people. And I think that's where we've been in the past. And that's a lot to do with training as well, perhaps coming up through different levels of training and perhaps not reaching the level of leadership where we are directors and choreographers. We're the performers, but we're not the directors and the choreographers and the managers and the producers. And so that limits the kind of work that we've been able to produce so far.
And can you reflect a little bit more on that, Suzanne? Like, why do you think we weren't disabled people weren't in that position? Do you think it was about the climate at that time, the awareness, or do you think that we're just at a stage where, oh, okay, we've got this disability dance now? what's that, what does that mean, and how's that driven here?
It's multi-layered. So first of all, you have to have the training and educational opportunities, and there are multiple barriers to that for people with disabilities. For start, in terms of role models, you don't see many disabled performers in really kind of high-profile positions. So to even consider that might be a career possibility, and to even pursue that. I mean, I think we were lucky. We sort of stumbled across Touch Compass at quite a pivotal moment in our lives where we were open to that pathway. And then also you and I both went overseas to get more training, to build more experience and international experience to our sort of career portfolio. But not many people get to do that, and so that's quite a rare opportunity. So it's training, it's opportunities, it's role models, but also I think there's this unconscious bias that happens, that often people who do have experience aren't elevated into leadership positions because there's this unconscious bias going on. Oh, well, actually, they're good as a performer, but we don't see them as a producer. We don't see them as a choreographer. And so they're not elevated into those positions. There's not a lot of shoulder tapping going on, and there isn't the support systems put in place to allow people to reach those roles in maybe a slightly different way that would be a traditional non-disabled way of being in those roles. And so, yeah, that's quite a long-winded answer, but it's really multi-layered. It's not just one thing.
Yeah, thanks, Suzanne. I just want to ask one more. I just want to focus on another point in relationship to the stages in New Zealand. When you are witnessing non-disabled dancers and companies performing on stage, can you reflect on what sort of impact that might have had on you in relationship to your performance at that time, or did it have an impact, or how would you like to acknowledge it? Was that quite amazing when you started like noticing and seeing other New Zealand dance companies performing and presenting works at that time, non-disabled?
You mean, sorry, with disabled people?
No, just in general. Like, how did that impact you in any way as a disabled dancers by the work that was going on around you? Because just an example, when I first come into Touch Compass, I was witnessing Black Grace, and I was going, oh my gosh, this company is amazing, and I felt quite empowered to see a company that was made up of Pacific Islander and Māori, and it sort of empowered me in a way to feel more welcomed into that dance space as well, and then actually meeting them, and then getting to know them more intimately and stuff sort of enhanced my career somewhat as I shifted through Touch Compass in the early days. So I'm just wondering how the non-disabled dance companies back then influenced you in any way, if it did.
Well, I think, I learnt a lot from the non-disabled dancers. As is often the case with dancers with disabilities, or, we're talking about the dance form, we get our experience through companies rather than going through training institutions. And so it becomes like sort of a baptism by fire, like you learn on the job. And so you learn a lot from the non-disabled dancers who've had more training and perhaps, a wider breadth of experience. So that's really valuable. What I noticed though, in my own career is that when I was seeing a lot of performance, when I was traveling internationally and I was seeing a lot of contemporary dance and contemporary theatre all over the world, I became less interested in non-disabled dance, and I found it way more interesting watching performers with disabilities, because I really enjoyed that point of difference, or the uniqueness of their movement, or the uniqueness of their expression.
Kia ora. Thanks, Suzanne. Appreciate that. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I move on to asking Lusi that question?
No, I'm all good.
Thank you. Okay. Well, Lusi, once again, I just reiterate that I'm going to share a bit of a mana of Lusi, if that's all right with you, Lusi. Just around that question of what is missing from TC and NZ stages, and Lusi has mentioned it has been evident that TC has had a significant impact on stages over the years. By influencing their presence on the performing arts scene, bringing the consciousness of disability through relationships and connections between the artists with different performance abilities. TC brought opportunities to other people in the same field of setting up another company in their communities and built an excellent connection with up and coming new artists who want to continue their developments in the arts industry. That is what's missing from TC, the level of high quality of work they do. So kia ora for that, Lusi. I think that's a real strong statement there, and it's sort of, and Lusi, please write anything that might pop up in your mind as we move forward, but it sort of reflects upon like my early days of touch compass and coming in with no awareness to who's the Dora Duncan one, no awareness to the genres, no awareness to nothing. So, and coming in with a blank slate, I think worked for me as well, because I come in, I brought a humbleness about it. So I was introduced to the dance room quite humbly, and then I had the honour of meeting some amazing contemporary, like leading the way contemporary dancers at the time, and then there was a real strong rigor going on, because just witnessing the commitment that they did to be dancers and the extraordinary abilities they had to also, you know, both naturally and both practice. So yeah, I felt really fortunate, and I was never at the operations or the governance level at that time, just training a dance and trying to inject myself and adjust and transform and adapt as I went on. So I really like commenting on that question. As time went on, I started noticing that, yeah, maybe I could be allowed a voice. You know, I felt quite comfortable being a dancer at that time, and sort of like started noticing the aesthetics of access and into my artistic practice, and noticing what that meant for the programming as well. And then I thought to myself, oh well, you know, what are we Touch Compass doing to reduce the barriers of access? And it was quite evident that access to decision making wasn't quite there at that time. And maybe I could contribute to that by saying maybe I could have said a bit more, or considered having myself involved a bit more to create a more inclusive experience. But I felt like the disability consciousness was limited at that time. So yeah, but in relationship to seeing, experiencing and seeing other companies overseas that have that disability consciousness, I definitely like enhance and grasp those opportunities throughout my career overseas, and here we are now, hoping to build and create a more rigor storytelling here, hopefully, that our mokupunas can talk about. No, just kidding. But hey, with that said, I think we'll move on to our next question. And I think I'd like to kick that off from Lusi's perspective, because she has some real strong statements here. If you don't mind, Lusi. And it's all about, okay, we've acknowledged the past, but what do we want to see now moving forward? So Lusi said, Touch Compass needs to keep up with its building and establishing disability consciousness, awareness throughout Aotearoa and internationally. Of course, they continue creating quality of their work on stage and offer education and training possibilities. Everyone recognises them as well achieved everyone recognises them as well achieved, being a major leading integrated dance company in Aotearoa. Yeah, and that's cool, Lucy. I'm really glad you touched upon that disability consciousness and awareness, because you're right, it's not only with Touch Compass, I think it's an opportunity for Touch Compass to enhance what that means throughout Aotearoa, and enhance in a way that's more like, because what underpins that disability consciousness is that collective consciousness, and that's the next stage after that awareness is brought to the But I just want to pass it over. Well, sorry, Tristan, there'll be an opportunity to give some feedback and stuff at the towards the end there, Trish. We nearly did, but I just want to pass it back over to Suzanne. If
Sure.
if you can, Suzanne.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, sometimes when we use the term disability consciousness, it can be a little bit abstract and people think, oh, well, what is that? You know, they sort of have an idea, but not quite sure. And I guess one way would be to define it was that, is there any group that has the status of being a minority culture tends to have its own cultural norms and ways of doing things, and also it also starts to develop a political voice about equity and equality, and also about valuing their lifestyle as just another way of living, and that actually we don't want to be fitted into non-disabled culture. We don't want to be fitted into mainstream kind of values. We want to kind of generate our own culture. So I hope that kind of clarifies it a little bit. But coming down to, well, how do we sort of harness that, you know? And I think it's that actually that we're at the forefront of some really important contemporary conversations. And particularly from an Aotearoa perspective as well, you know, I think, you know, we're in a really perfect position to start having some really important conversations around decolonization and what that actually means for us as artists with disabilities in Aotearoa, and also as artists from different cultural perspectives. And, you know, what are the links around that, and how does that relate to Te Tiriti Waitangi as well? How are we bringing forward that conversation around decolonization? Because we can also talk about decolonization from a disability perspective, that we want to decolonize the thinking around disability.
Yeah, that's a good point about disability consciousness, Suzanne. And, you know, and basic for me, it's sort of just, it centers the disabled people, and it also extends beyond the person too, like beyond the person with lived experience, and it includes their allies, which is whānau, family, collaborators, friends, you know, and taking this real holistic approach around creating these awesome experiences. And I think we sort of like, I don't like using this word, but there's accountability too. Like, there's accountability that needs to enact that disability consciousness for everyone, and also for the disabled community. You know that we're on this journey of principles or practices for organisations, whatever that is, and that. But also honouring it's a place of transformation, you know, so it's a new language, it's a new kaupapa that we're trying to acknowledge, but it's an inclusive, equitable experience, you know. It's not about disabled people, you know, and non-disabled people. It's about, okay, it's about like, if we're talking about disability, what does that really mean, you know? How do we really enhance that so that all of us as collaborators and allies in whānau, in community, all sort of having a collective sort of giving to that, but led in a disability space. Is there anything else you'd like to reflect upon there, Suzanne?
Yeah, I think in terms of, we go back to that question about what's been missing, or rather than framing it in the negative, you know, what do we want to bring forward? And I think what we could bring forward or aim towards is actually bringing some real rigor to the kind of work that we make. And I think that sometimes it's about having some deep thinking and some deep research and being really clear about what is the message or what is the theme that we're actually trying to explore, and actually, you know, make a statement around. Because I think in the past, I think often, you know, the main sort of theme of Touch Compass has been that there are dancers with disabilities and dancers without disabilities, but there's been, in terms of the kind of work that's been created, and the content has been quite random, all sorts of things, and that's great, but it hasn't had any specific message other than, yeah, that's great, we can have dancers with disabilities and dancers without, making some interesting work. I think we could say a lot more. I think we could have a lot more impact, and in order to do that, we need some real rigor about the kind of work we make and the sort of lens that it's coming through.
Kia ora. Yeah. I'm just really excited looking at, you know, this new transformation that's occurring within Touch Compass Dance Trust. And I think once that's settled and enhanced, that will drive too what are the new works and that get developed with Touch Compass. But yeah, I'm really interested too in reducing the barriers to access around our performances. And knowing that, you know, we will make mistakes along the way, but also just having that disability consciousness umbrella gives us new ways to consider and create inclusive experiences together. So I'm really excited about it, especially with Rita. Rita is like, straight off the bat, sort of really like a strong voice for this new transformation. And just acknowledging our past Touch Compass as well, our kiki, who's you know, brought this opportunity for us to be together through Rita. So yeah, I think I'm all winded, and I do apologise for talking a bit quick there, Lucy. But I get a bit carried away there. I'm thinking, wow, I'm in the flow. All my learnings in English and that is at the forefront right now. I'm going to take advantage of it. But now I think we're going to be moving into a bit of questions and reflections from our gorgeous participants today. So how should we kick this off? Should I just put it out there and just say, hey, let's have a conversation, audience? Is there anything in particular you'd like to ask of us or reflect upon after hearing our multiplicity answers and statements?
Yeah, Rod, I've got some things I'd like to share, and I suppose Rodney, thank you, and Suzanne as well. There's a sort of, not so much polarity, but I'm thinking of people particularly who have a label around, and it's not a helpful label, and you know, intellectual disability. I mean, that constructs an identity. We put it on someone, might call them something, and off you go. But when I look at the people who are involved, not in the professional company, if I can use that word, but in the pathway, the youth and the community groups, I think that that's vital, that the competency and the skill, the mahi around their participation. Like, you know, Rodney spoke for Lusi, reflecting on different performance abilities is really important. And then Suzanne, I like what you're suggesting there. For me, I wrote down the word, this is about a manifesto. From my understanding, perhaps this is about having a disability voice being heard rather than voice of others about disability. And so moving in that way, I've got to stand in the space around people whose competency is denigrated by the way we label them and apply those labels, and have used them and still do use them actually in quite a eugenic fashion to either, you know, deny their personhood or institutionalize them and separate them. And thinking, you know, who's contributed initially to the work around Touch Compass? Of course, Jessie. And there's you know, Duncan there, who has picked up the same kind of identity and role and brings forward the strengths and capacities as an art maker, as a dancer, as a performer. And I think it's really vital that that group of people who aren't seen to look like other practitioners in the professional company, but indeed do have a really, really important place in our society across all those different groups, and thinking about what disability cultural competence and cultural consciousness is about, understanding that there's a whole range of people in society, and yeah, we all have different performance abilities, different competencies, and somehow I think the Touch Compass needs to say the door has to be kept open as well. Yeah. You know, thinking about thinking about the young woman who go to the youth class that he's involved with. They're secondary school students. They also go to theatre. They go to interacting theatre class, and then their families have been drawn through. And so that ties back to what Rodney was saying. It can be about advocates and allies as well. But for me, it's got to be the disability voice that's heard, not the voice about disability. And that, I think, is vital here. So that's my, you know, piece at this point. And there's a whole lot of reasons in behind that. Yeah. Sophie, our daughter, was 3 days old, and we were told we didn't have to take her home. She could be placed in the institution, you know, and she's been involved with theatre and with dance now for, well over a decade, and advocacy through theatre. So I think those creative leverage points are very, very powerful. So I think, you know, I want to stand strong on that. Come back to what a manifesto looks like, about value, about being clear, you know, and there I am in a room surrounded by books about these things. So, yeah, and happy to share. I've done some writing about disability voice, but I'll do that back through the network, and you can see, you know, whose voice matters.
Yeah.
Yeah, and somehow keeping it open so the voices we discount are heard as well.
Yes, totally.
Thank you. Yeah.
Kia ora. Yeah, because disabled people are not a homogenous group, you know.
That's right. Yeah.
And you know, that's the core of disability consciousness, what you just said there. That's the core of it.
Yeah.
I wonder if Duncan would like to speak to that space.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I do agree with Rod, but also it's not just about that. It's not about the colonizing. It's about getting along with Māori and Pacifica. That's what I feel. You gotta respect them. Respect everyone, not just the colour or the label. That's not fair on us. Yeah. That's me.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lucy said, well said, Rod.
Yeah.
I think Trish would like to contribute.
Trish,
Yeah, I agree with you. Oh, disabled people have been put in the background and faded for a for a very long time. For me as a disabled performer, 25 taught me to share my life story in a way that people know disabled people have a voice. Like with Lucy and Duncan, they did story through dance and had to fight assistance. I always wanted to do a film, a dance film of my fight to be a dancer. I have once wanted to be a ballerina. I know I said it 100 times, but after my dream is important to me. I've always wanted to be the main character in the Nutcracker Clara. And nobody, even better school I went to, they all know you can't learn better. But I have enough first position singer. But my dream is I'm gonna be 50 next year, and I have not had my dream me. I've always wanted to be in performing with touch campus in a proper show. And yet I have performed with touch campus at Commitment with Suzanne. But that's the test I only go. But I believe touch campus can do a lot for me. TC could help me to fulfill a dream.
Kia ora, thanks, Trish. Thank you, mana waine. Yeah, I've been thinking too, like we've been thinking in this other panel that like the opposite to disability is not inability, it's access. You know, and because that defines what this disability consciousness is about. So it's not non-disabled. You know, it's not inability, it's access. That's the actual opposite to disability.
For me, go to a dance guru, ask them to teach me how to do ballet so I can see the sands of the dance person. No, because you have a disability. But I only have cerebral palsy. I have a really good brain. I do understand. I love ballet, but dance teachers have not really got to know the person. They look at the person with a disability, not the person without. So that's my first graduation has been.
Hey Trish, what just is trying to say is, it's about the person, not the label. Yeah.
Kia ora.
Can
Kia
I
ora whānau.
supplement Rodney's point about the tension between disability identity and that being upended by the ideas of access? I've looked across the names I've put down of the people involved in the community and youth class. There are only 2 people out of 16 names who actually, as far as I understand, have full control over their access. The others are either rely on family and whānau or disability service providers to enable their participation, to give them value, and to upend some of the labelling that they experience and the loss of control that sits alongside that. And I'm just thinking in those terms, and perhaps it's also many others in the broader collective of dancers, of supporters, of audiences around the work of Touch Compass might also experience the same thing. So kia ora, Rodney, I think it's a very powerful pole to draw towards, to say, you know, you're validated by the support for you to access, to be the person who you fully can be, not the label of what you can't do.
Yeah, kia ora.
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the right, it's not just the disability providers, it's about the people with disabilities themselves.
That's an important point, Duncan, actually, really important, because I think what happens, and it's interesting coming from the perspective of someone who's acquired a disability. So up to the age of 22, I had a completely sort of non-disabled conditioning, and then I acquired a disability. So we're actually conditioned to think in a particular way. And I think what people have been talking about for this last hour is that we're still really beholden to this medical model of disability, where it's diagnostic. So it's actually focused on the individual. And so the individual is seen as being impaired or lacking in some way. And that becomes the label, and that becomes the world sees you. So we're still very much beholden to the medical model of disability. And that's right down to the way that the services are laid out, the kind of support that's available, the kind of advocacy, the sort of institutions we're all involved with, and even educational institutions. And so I think we all know here about the social model of disability, where, you know, we talk about, oh, well, there's a recognition that it's society that's disabling us, that, you know, we move through the world in a variety of ways. And you can call them impairments, you can call it neurological diversity, you can call it a variety of things, but we have this sort of functional diversity.
That's what I've been trying to say to somebody, and that's what the day you've hit the nail on the head to say.
Great, thank you. So I mean, I guess it's just acknowledging that we're still in the grip of the medical model of disability, and we're still trying to find a way out of that. And as Rodney said, access, if we focus on access, we're not focusing on disability, then that's sort of the way out of it. And we need many minds to think about how we can improve that access and what that might look like.
Can I, you know, kind of click in on the back of what Suzanne's been saying? I went and looked at the Arts Access Aotearoa website about an hour ago, and looked at the creative spaces list that they have for Auckland, for tamaki kōrero, and looked across, and at this stage there are 24 creative spaces identified. Now 15 of them either present as an activity program or a base or a therapy provider.
Right.
7, which is again from the last time I did this quite a while ago, talk about impact of marginalisation and using arts to bring about social change, particularly to youth. So I read between the lines and I'm thinking, this is marginalisation, mental health. There are 2 creative space organisations on that list in Auckland which are arts practice based. Touch Compass is one of them.
What's the other?
Oh, the other one is Interacting Disability Theatre. There's 2 that are arts practice based.
Okay, and the others are more focused around
The
therapy.
others are
Therapy,
focused
yes.
around the intervention framework around service delivery and therapy and treatment. So the cultural context that art making and performance sits in Tamaki Makaurau is, as you say, absolutely woven into this very tight-knit basket of what's wrong with you, what do we have to do for you to do today to fix you up or keep you out of the way, not have you being a bother for the rest of us.
Yeah, so, and I guess that's, you know, like Touch Compass from the beginning has really sought to have it be seen as a professional company as opposed to therapy. And you know, I thought we were way beyond that conversation now, but really we're not, because as you say, that medical model is very focused on therapy and rehabilitation. And there's this underlying assumption that it wouldn't have the kind of rigor that non-disabled professional work would have.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because of course it's coming from a place of deficit.
Right.
And often it doesn't have the rigor because it doesn't have the resources and the educational framework and the training to create that top level, high quality professional performance.
But was it Duncan who said sometimes it's the disabled individuals in the community themselves have taken on this space? That they are less, that they're, you know, the jargony word, the embodiment of difference, either in their physicality or their cognitive capacity, means they're less than other people, and boom, you've just put your hand up to join the othering mechanism, you know, of being so different, you're not like us, and we've got a place for you, and we still have it just across the Fau River from where I live. And it's it was, when it was first built, was the Avondale Asylum. It's still there.
Yeah, I know what
in our heads, it's still there.
Right, I know what you mean, but what I'm saying, the more you focus on the medical role, that's not, people are going to think we are disability, but we're not.
Yeah.
Well, owning disability becomes an invitation too, as well, for a lot of people. We have these conversations.
We are a person for the disability seeker. We are people first, disability seeker. That's why I see myself. I live with a disability. That's how I believe that I have a disability first. Secondly, I am a person first. I believe this is a place of work where we can be creative, and that's where.
Yeah, awesome. Good point, Trish. And you know, I suppose that becomes environmental too, because
I gotta go by.
yeah, Trish, thank you.
Take care. Yeah.
Because I feel like I want to be part of the company now. Nice to meet you, JT. My name is Trish. Hope to work with you.
Awesome, Trish.
Thank you.
Have you got any? Sorry. Do we have any other? Oh. Do we have anyone else wanting to share some strong thoughts before we close? Nobody? Hey, that was great kōrero today, everybody. I really thank you for bringing your mana and bringing your openness to ko te taonga, ko te whakarongo. You know, the treasure right here as we are with each other is to respect each other with unconditionally, and I think that felt really strong throughout our hui today. But I'm just going to pass it over to our dynamics, Izzy and JT. Tēnā koe rangatira, JT. Welcome.
Kia ora iho, aroha mai for arriving late. It's been a week of digital meetings. All good. If you'd like, I'll happily close this out with a karakia, eh?
Yeah, kia ora.
E te atua, ho mai ki te mātou. Tau manamatanga, tau rau Māori e, tau kaha me tau aroha. Mō tēnā rā, āmine.
All right. Thank you again so much, everyone. And thank you for your patience as we dealt with those few technical issues. Hopefully we'll see you all again next time, whenever that may be. Have a great weekend and see you soon. Thanks for joining us.